G'day Jafffa Adventures, Terry King here. Welcome to the channel. Back onto the Monte today, and it's all about getting this car prepped for paint. You want to see me strip? Stick around. Now before I start to strip this car down and pull bits off of it, I do have two panels that are already off the car and I can make a start on those. I got the boot here ready to go and I got the bonnet here ready to go as well. Now we left off with the bonnet last video when that rainstorm came, and that's how much of that bonnet I got sanded down. Now one of the few decals that the previous owner left on this car was this one here on the boot. That's not period correct for this car, and I do have a full sticker kit for the car that I'll put on obviously once paint's done. But I'm going to get that off. I'm going to try a caramel wheel first. If that doesn't pull it off easily enough, I'll just sand it off with the DA. Wow, that's making short notice of it. Just got a bit of carby cleaner here. I don't know whether that's bits of the caramel wheel. No, I think that's still a little bit of the adhesive. That's it, gonzo. Sweet. Next thing I'll do is I'll pull this lock cylinder out. The previous paint job was bodgy as. It looks like they painted this lock cylinder with a little touch-up brush, and the masking job around that gasket is just horrendous. So, lock cylinder out. Yeah, what sort of surprises have we got hidden here? It's actually RTV that somebody has put down here and painted over top of it. And it looks like there's a nice big hole here. I don't know whether the hole's meant to be there. Certainly doesn't look like it. Looks like I've got some more rust repairs on my hands. Now I believe this is just meant to slide up. It's got a little collar over the locking sleeve. But I don't have a lot to lever on there because the underlying metal is disappeared. Okay, I got a wider blade screwdriver. Let's see what that gets us. Success. Yep, as I suspected, that slides over the lock cylinder. Out she comes. All right, let me get the wire wheel in here and see what other special surprises we can find. That's all old RTV balling up. This whitey pink colored stuff there, that's just factory seam sealer. Still a bit of RTV, it goes out to about here. It looks like they tried to blend it in before painting it over. Good professional job. All right, I can see what I'm working with now. That's not going to be too difficult to put a patch panel in there. And just over here, there's a little bit of something going on there. It just looks like a little bit of bubbled rust. I'm not going to put a patch panel there, I'll just treat that stuff. Now I've got my little pneumatic cutting wheel of doom with the guards fully removed so that creates maximum carnage. And I'm going to cut that rust out. Get ready to create myself a patch panel. Now I've got a tiny little Dremel cutoff wheel because it's so tight in here. I can't get that little big disc in there. There we go. That's all good metal there, so I'll be able to weld to that. And there's that mess. All right, I got a bit of Monte Carlo metal here that came out of the top of the guard that I cut out. Just took that over to my flapper wheel and cleaned the paint off of it. Now let's get a rough sort of semblance of how big this is going to be. Same as before, I'm just going to sneak up on it. That's probably as far as I'll go, and I'll mold this into shape first, and then I'll cut the perimeter. Just got a leather shot bag, get my bit of metal, Get my metal Foreman mallet. It's coming. A little bit deeper on that curvature yet. That angle there looks pretty good. I'll trim that to size now. Just sneaking in on my final cuts. All right, patch panels all trimmed out. Fits in the little hole nicely. Time to make them in place. There, that'll just sort of clip there in place. All right, I'll just wipe a little bit of seam sealer in those two little depressions there. Call that one done. Now to get back onto the job that I was intending to do before I got derailed with this rust repair. Okay, that bonnet is stripped down with 80 grit. What my intention was to do here was just to create a little bit of a key so that my epoxy primer can stick. And that's what I've got here with the 80 grit scratches. The reason I'm hitting with wax and grease is just to take a little bit of that dust that's left off. I blew the bonnet off with the high pressure hose, but the dust always sits inside of the little cracks and crevices. All right, now I'm just gonna do the exact same thing on this boot panel. That's 80 grit on a DA. All right, that boot lid is all sanded down now. It's actually laid out pretty flat. That spot there is where I grinded off to put my earth strap to do the welding. There are two low/high spots that I have found so far. This sanding process isn't even to find the high and low spots yet. This sanding process is just to create the key for my primer to stick. But anyway, there's a low spot sitting here, and there's a high spot here just in front of it, and that's exactly the same over on this side. Now that is from me when I took this boot off. Right here is where the boot hinge bolts up, and when I pulled that boot off, I allowed these things to drag along the inside skin of that boot, and that's what's created those high and low spots on me. Now the low spots are easy enough to deal with just with a skim coat of filler, but the high spots, I've got to knock those down. That one there still got a crown on it. I can feel it. That's pretty good down. Got a low spot sitting through here, which the filler can take care of. And our original low spot right there. I got most of that high knocked down. Okay, we'll call this boot panel good enough for a shot of primer. When I was cleaning up this boot, I noticed that there were a couple of cracks in the metal here where the hinges mount up. Got a nice decent long one there, and over on the opposite side it's opening up there as well. So I'm going to weld that up before that becomes more problematic. Cover up my RPO codes. I don't want little welding slag to melt that on me. That side's all dressed up, as is the other side. Now, because I'm going to mix up one pot of primer, and that one pot is going to go much further than the boot and the bonnet, I'll clean up a few other ancillary pieces and shoot them with primer at the same time. Now, this is the spoiler that sits on the deck lid, of course, and it's got a crack here. And the original owner told me that somebody closed the boot, put their hand here, and closed the boot and put that crack there. He has had a go at repairing it. I don't know what he's done to this side. Actually, I don't know what he's done to the back side either, but there is some goo here on this crack. So I'm going to take the DA and just clean that out a little bit. And I'll clean this side out as well. I'm not happy with that repair. I think I'll probably reinforce that somehow. Can't go too crazy here, of course, because the underlying spoiler is just, I don't know what it is, fiberglass or some sort of soft compound anyway. And I don't want to sand it down to oblivion. That's cleaned up that crack reasonably well. Now, what's this stuff on the inside? Bondo. There's our crack running along, and it ends right there. Can't get my DA in this tight little spot here. I'll have to work something out to get in there. And then we've got the crack over on this side as well. Bondo's okay for leveling, but it's not any good for structural integrity. You know, it's not going to prevent that crack from cracking anymore. Okay, I think I can get my little die grinder flappy wheel in there. That's all cleaned up now. There's our crack on the one side, and it actually runs up a little bit on this flange on the 45. And if I flex that, that crack opens and closes. So that crack is flapping in the breeze, so to speak, at the moment. And then the second crack is up here on the top side, and same thing. If I flex that, that crack opens and closes. That crack runs along here, all the way up to here. Now there is no structural integrity in that at all. So I think the way that I'm going to handle it is I'm going to put some fiberglass matting down there to give that the strength. Then I can Bondo up this side and just fill that very small, shallow depression where that crack runs. I got a Scotch-Brite pad here, a maroon Scotch-Brite pad. I'm just going to hunt down the end of that crack, scuff this up to give my fiberglass mat something to stick to. That's it. That's where it ends, right there. It goes up and around the base of this stud as well. Since that side was cracked, I said to myself, Self, you better check the other side and just see whether there's any cracks there. So I came down to the other end, and sure as shit, there's a crack there. It's not coming through on the outside yet, but there's definitely an internal crack. So based on that, I said, Self, I better check the rest of these studs. That one there has got a little tiny crack on it. This one here has got a reasonable crack. That one is good. And this one's got a crack opening up on it. And all of the cracks are on the downside of that spoiler. So that spoiler mounts on the boot lid like that. People grab a hold of that, slam the boot lid down, holding onto the spoiler, and it's put stress on all of these points. So I'm glad I checked that. I'm going to put fiberglass mat on every single one of these studs, even this one that hasn't cracked yet. This fiberglass cloth really is a shitty product to work with. Okay, I've got my bits and pieces all cut out across every one of the studs. That'll do this side. Of course, I've got the crack on that side as well, but I'll do that once this stuff sets up. I'll chalk that up so that any extra fiberglass resin runs that way and not this way, and then drips down on the edge that is actually visible. Because once this stuff goes off, it is rock hard, especially compared to this, 39-year-old plastic. Here's a pro tip for things like fiberglass resin or any can, even paint, that you don't use a lot of. You only need a little bit. If you take that lid off, when you pour it out of the tin, it usually drips down the face of the tin and it gets shit everywhere. And secondly, once you've cracked the thing open, it tends to dry out much quicker. So the pro tip is to put a tech screw in the side of your can. And then when you need your product, just take your tech screw out, pour your product into whatever receptacle that you want, and Bob's your uncle. This can here is well over, it's probably 2 years old, maybe even more. And it's lasted through 2 or 3 Queensland summers at 39 or 40 degrees. Still as liquid as the day I got it. There's our resin. We want about 3 mil of hardener. And our container says 1 mil is 45 drops. Shit, I'll be counting forever. That container's 15 mil, and I reckon there's about 5 mil left in there. So I'll go with 3/5 of this container. This stuff does not set up as quickly as Bondo though, so you do have a little bit of time. Okay, now for the real shitty bit. Definitely gotta wear gloves with this shit. If you got any dry bits on your mat, then you just dab a little bit of this resin on it. And what's my saying? Bob's your uncle. These little bits here you can trim off once they've hardened. To deal with them now, if you start plucking them out, you'll kind of unwind the whole fiberglass cloth. All right, I'll move along to the next and the next and the next until they're all finished. Okay, it's been about 45 minutes now. This stuff is set up, and I will just go along and trim these whiskers while it's still a little bit pliable. Any of these extra whiskers that are hanging out that I can't get with the scissors, I'll grind them off when the stuff's fully set up. There was our main crack area that started this whole affair. And if I look over on the back side, I can see a little bit of resin that's come through the crack. That is exactly what I wanted because that's going to bond that crack. This has only been set for about an hour, but there's no flex in there at all at the moment. And you saw that before, it had quite a bit of flex. All right, I'll move on to this side. I've only got one patch to do, this reasonably long one. And 24 hours from now, we can spray some primer on this. Okay, 24 hours later, and this spoiler is nearing completion. Obviously, all my fiberglass is set up now. I've gone through and I've taken my sander and I've just taken off the front edges of where that fiberglass sat on both sides. And the reason I've done that is so that it could lay flat on the boot lid. Now we'll look at that edge there. That is awesome, nice and tight. And the same thing with this edge down here. Nice and tight. Not done with the spoiler yet, however. That's where that crack came through onto the outside. I know that that's a depression, so I'm going to get a little bit of my spot putty and I'm going to fill that in and blend that in before I go ahead and hit this with a high build primer. Now I've got some glaze putty here. This stuff's called ultra fine finishing filler, and the reason I'm using that and not regular Bondo is because I've just got such a small amount to do. Now I've got a little mixing board here. I prefer using these mixing boards rather than mixing it on cardboard, for example, because the cardboard pulls the oils out of this filler, and I found that it seems to set off a little bit too quickly. Add in our hardener. Just going after a uniform color before I spread this stuff on the panel. That looks pretty good. Let's go over to the panel. Now that's hardened up nicely. Got a bit of wax and grease remover just to take off that skim of oil that you get on the top of this stuff so that it doesn't clog up my sandpaper. I got a round sanding block here and I got 240 grit paper. I normally don't start with 240 with normal Bondo, but with this stuff, because it's so soft and it's just this finishing putty, 240 is all I need. That is sanded in there quite nicely. You can see I got one teeny tiny low spot here. I gotta mix up the edge of a razor blade full just to fill that little spot there. Other than that, blend it in nicely, and the high build primer will take up any of those scratch marks. All right, I got a razor blade with a wee bit of filler. That low spot right there. And there's one little dot right there, which the high build primer would probably fill, but we're here with this stuff, so why not? Okay, that teeny little bit of filler is set up. That's it, she's blended in. The high build primer will take care of any scratches in there. Call that spoiler finished, move on to the next bits. All right, start to work on some of the ancillary bits. And I'm gonna start here with the bumper end covers. I'm scuffing those down with my maroon colored Scotch-Brite pad, which apparently is about a 320 grit. Again, the idea here is just to create a key for my primer to stick. That looks good. That's doing what it needs to do. I'll see you in an hour or so when I get the two of these knocked over. Well, I got those two tail light bezels finished, and now I'm moving on to the bumper cover. I'm just starting with wax and grease remover because it's got all sorts of this black undercoating goo shit on it. And I'm trying to get that stuff off before I start sanding because I know that shit will clog the sandpaper up instantly. It does come off, but it takes a bit of elbow grease. You hear it all the time, but it's dead true. This prep work is the time-consuming stuff. This just burns up hours and hours. But it's got to be done. You don't do this properly, and when I shoot that paint, in a year's time, it'll be healing up on me. I'll see you guys when I'm finished with the wax and grease remover. Here's some fun and games. I pulled off that little, I don't know, it's just a black trim piece that sits inside of this bumper cover, and it's held on with a couple of bits of double-sided 3M tape, and of course all the adhesive is remaining on the bumper. You know, it'd be nice to have a win just every once in a while. This is just getting the bits of foam off between the two sides of the sticky bits. I still have to get the adhesive off the bumper cover and off the black trim bit. There's the crown of the bumper cover. That's the halfway mark. Well, it's about an hour later. I have that all removed now. It took a little bit of elbow grease, some Scotch-Brite, and some thinners, but I eventually got it. So now I'm going to go over the entire bumper cover with the Scotch-Brite pad, scuff it up completely so that it's ready for primer. Then we'll move on to the next bit. I am making progress, so this is a good thing. I don't know why, but I feel when I finish this bumper cover, that's going to be the backbroken of the really hard bits. Apart from the nose cone, this is probably the most intricate, difficult bit. And the good thing about the nose cone is it's brand new. I got the bumper cover fully done, but there are these two strips that are on the top of the cover, and they are held in with some 3M tape as well. I'm going to peel them off and replace them. See how they're kind of folding as I peel them? They are available aftermarket, so I am going to get them aftermarket. Boy, that double-sided tape has really got them. The reason that I'm not just taping over these and painting the car with these things in situ is this leading edge here is just a little bit difficult to get to, and that actually is right in your face. So rather than having a tape line along there, I figure I'll just peel these suckers off, paint the whole bumper, and replace them with the newbies. One side down, one to go. That bumper cover is now finished. That took way longer than I was anticipating. Those two glue sections, one along here and one along this face here, landed me with a, I don't know, 3 or 4 hour job. Ah well, she's done. I'll put it in the pile of completed parts and move on. These are a couple of filler panels that attach to that rear bumper cover. I'll have to double check, but I think those are actually painted black. And these have been sprayed with that maroon color. Here we go again. Well, I think I've got enough bits now for one pot of primer. 2 headlight bezels, spoiler, rear boot lid, bonnet, rear bumper cover, that rear valance panel, and those 2 filler panels that go on the bumper cover. But right now the shadows are getting a wee bit long. It's close to beer o'clock. I'll spray this stuff tomorrow. Catch ya. Okay, getting ready now to shoot this primer. I've taped up the underside of this bonnet. This is just that cheap, shitty paint drop sheets that you can get from Bunnings. They're like $4 or $5 for 9 square meters or even larger. I wouldn't do that again. It's just too thin, and I'm sure it's gonna rip eventually, and I'll have to end up redoing it with the proper masking sheets. But anyway, this will do for my initial coat of primer anyway. Now I'm going to hit this surface with wax and grease for one last time. Everything's now taped up, wax and grease remover on everything. It is a perfect day in the paint booth today. Relative humidity probably 20%, 20 degrees out, not a stitch of a breeze. Couldn't ask for better booth conditions. The filters in my mask are a wee bit crusty, so I'm gonna replace them. That's the dust side, that's the vapor side. Here we go, 2 brand new filters. Time to mix up my high build primer. This is basically like Bondo spraying Bondo. Damn, I should have got the paint shop to mix this stuff up. This is going to take a while. Well, after 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes of stirring, I got RSI, but I've got the stuff blended. I can't believe I did that bonehead move and didn't get the paint shop to put this on the shaker. It's all right. All right, this stuff is mixed 4:1, which means 4 parts of this paint and 1 part hardener. Gonna transfer it over into my paint cup and start the mixing process. That is ready to shoot. That is a 1.8 millimeter tip on this thing, which is what you need when you're spraying this high build primer. That's like double the size of a tip that you'd use for regular painting. All right, everything is finished. Looking pretty good. That high build primer lays down in there beautifully. There's our bonnet, and there's our boot, and there's the other miscellaneous bits and pieces. All right, I'll let this set up for 24 hours, and then I'll get out the guide coat, and we'll start the sanding process. Until then, I gotta put my booth away.